The Alaska summit is over. Hours of talks, handshakes, cameras flashing. Trump called it productive. Putin called it necessary. But let's cut through the headlines. No ceasefire, no agreement, just images. Red carpets, staged smiles, and narratives crafted for domestic audiences. So the question is simple. Did anything change on the battlefield, or was this summit just theater? And if it was theater, who walked away as the winner and who was left out in the cold? The meeting took place at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson near Anchorage, a symbolic location since Alaska is the closest U.S. territory to Russia, less than 600 miles across the Bering Strait. As Reuters pointed out, this was the first direct meeting between Trump and Putin since the escalation of the Ukraine war. The agenda was ambitious: Ukraine, European security, arms control, and even Arctic cooperation. But as the BBC underlined, expectations were quickly scaled back. By the time the two men walked into the room, the question wasn't, will there be peace? It was, will they at least keep talking? So, what actually happened in Anchorage? According to Reuters, the talks lasted almost 3 hours. Trump called them constructive. Putin said they were respectful, but neither offered details. No ceasefire, no roadmap, nothing concrete. Leaks reported by the Financial Times suggested that a limited freeze of fighting in parts of eastern Ukraine was floated. But U.S. officials told Associated Press these were exploratory ideas, not formal agreements. In other words, trial balloons, not commitments. And here's the cliffhanger. If nothing was agreed, why did both leaders call the summit a success? That's the question we need to answer. On television, the story looked different. Cameras captured smiles, handshakes, and polite words. CNN called it a moment of statesmanship. Fox News framed Trump as the man of peace. And Russian state TV broadcast images of Putin walking down a red carpet on American soil. But what do these images actually mean? Do they signal progress or just optics? According to the Washington Post, Anchorage was less about negotiation and more about narrative. And narratives are powerful. For Putin, the story was Russia is back on equal footing with the United States. For Trump, the story was I am the leader bold enough to talk peace with Moscow. So let me ask you directly, do you think this kind of summit helps prevent war or does it normalize it? Comment below. I want to hear your take. And in a moment, we'll see why Putin may have gained more than Trump, even without a single concession. From Moscow's perspective, this was nothing short of a victory. No concessions, no troop withdrawals, but plenty of prestige. Russian state-controlled television replayed the red carpet footage again and again, emphasizing every handshake, every smile, every camera flash. Analysts close to the Kremlin described it as the end of isolation, a phrase that speaks volumes. For years, Russia has been portrayed as a pariah in the West, yet here was Putin, standing side by side with the U.S. president on American soil. As Al Jazeera observed, the very fact that Putin was received not in a neutral country but in the United States itself, and specifically at a U.S. military base, was framed domestically as proof that Washington has no choice but to treat Russia as an equal. That image alone, broadcast to millions of Russian households, was worth more than any communique. Think about the timing. Russia is under sanctions, its economy is strained, but propaganda is about psychology, not numbers. When people see their leader welcomed abroad, they are told, we are not isolated, we are respected. And in a society where television is the dominant source of information, perception becomes reality. This isn't new. Remember Reykjavik in 1986 when Gorbachev stood next to Reagan? The agreements were limited, but the optics reshaped the Soviet self-image. For Putin, Anchorage may play a similar role. It shows Russians that despite sanctions, despite the war, their president still commands global attention. So let me ask you, if you were in Putin's position, what would you rather have? A tough deal that forces you to compromise? Or images that legitimize your power at home without giving away a single concession? For a leader who thrives on projecting strength, the answer is obvious. Exactly. Sometimes the photo matters more than the communique. And yet, here's the catch. Prestige buys time, and time can be dangerous. Because while leaders pose for the cameras, the war keeps grinding on. Cities are shelled, soldiers are killed, and the balance of power does not shift. And that leads to a question we must consider carefully. Can prestige abroad mask the pressure at home, or will this show of strength eventually backfire if the battlefield tells a different story? Hold that thought, because in a moment we'll see what Trump actually gained and why his gamble may be even riskier than Putin's. Trump walked into the summit determined to look like the man of peace. He wanted images that said, "I alone can talk to Putin." And in front of the cameras, he got exactly that. He shook hands, he smiled, he called the talks constructive. For his domestic audience, it was a performance designed to project leadership. Fox News praised him as the only president bold enough to step into the room with Putin. CNN was more skeptical, calling it a photo op with little substance. But for Trump, headlines were the goal, not details. He even hinted at land swaps and security guarantees, but then he carefully added, "Ukraine has to agree." That single phrase is a political shield. It lets him sound bold and innovative without committing to anything concrete. For his base, he can claim, "I'm working on peace." For Moscow, he can suggest, "I'm open to creative options." And for critics at home, he can say, "Nothing is decided without Kyiv." It's a balancing act, a way of being everything to everyone at once. But here's the risk. America's allies are not easily reassured by vague promises. In Berlin, officials privately told Deutsche Welle they worried Trump was testing Europe's patience. In Warsaw and Vilnius, leaders asked openly whether Washington might trade Ukrainian land for a fragile truce. These doubts matter, because NATO depends on trust, and once that trust erodes, rebuilding it is far harder than posing for a handshake. And what about at home? Trump's supporters may applaud the optics, but his critics are already sharpening their knives. The New York Times wrote that Trump delivered style without substance. Democrats in Congress warned that giving Putin a stage without extracting commitments only strengthens Moscow's hand. So Trump walks a thin line, celebrated by some as a statesman, condemned by others as a showman. So let me ask you directly, do you think a president should pursue peace through optics first and substance later, or should substance come first, with optics as a byproduct? It's not just a theoretical question, it's a test of strategy. And your answer probably reveals how you view American leadership in the world. And here's the cliffhanger. Can Trump continue to play both sides, appearing as a peacemaker without actually delivering results? Or will this strategy erode trust not only with America's allies, but also with American voters who expect more than just a show? We won't have to wait long to see, because Zelensky is scheduled to land in Washington next week, and that meeting will reveal whether Trump's balancing act can hold, or whether the contradictions will finally break into the open. This is the hardest part, because while the cameras in Anchorage focused on Trump and Putin, Ukraine was not even in the room. President Zelensky will meet Trump in Washington on Monday, but in Anchorage, decisions about Ukraine's future were debated without Ukraine present, and that absence speaks louder than any official statement. As The Guardian highlighted, Zelensky warned repeatedly that Ukraine's fate cannot be decided without Ukraine. Yet, from Kyiv's perspective, that is exactly what seems to be happening. The fear is simple but devastating, that Washington and Moscow might eventually cut a deal that freezes the war on Russia's terms, leaving occupied territories in limbo and creating a permanent gray zone in Eastern Europe. For Ukrainians, this is not just a diplomatic concern, it is an existential nightmare. Imagine living in Kharkiv or Mykolaiv and seeing leaders abroad smile for cameras while your city is still under bombardment. How would you feel knowing your country's fate is being discussed in faraway rooms without your voice included? That sense of being sidelined deepens mistrust, and mistrust is dangerous because it erodes the very alliance on which Ukraine's survival depends. The Washington Post reported that Ukrainian officials privately expressed frustration and fear after Anchorage, saying that the summit risked turning Ukraine into what they called a negotiating chip between two superpowers. Think about that word, a chip. not a partner, not an ally, but a bargaining token on a larger geopolitical table. This is why Zelensky insists on being physically present at negotiations, not because he expects instant breakthroughs, but because absence breeds suspicion. And suspicion has consequences. It can weaken morale on the battlefield. It can make Ukrainian citizens doubt the West's commitment. And it can embolden Moscow to push harder, knowing that Kyiv may be losing leverage in the diplomatic arena. So let me ask you, if you were Zelensky, would you trust promises made in Alaska without your seat at the table? Or would you see them as another risk of being sacrificed for the illusion of peace? That question cuts to the core of why Anchorage matters. Because in geopolitics, exclusion is not a technical detail, it is a signal of hierarchy. We will circle back to Ukraine soon, but first we need to examine how Europe reacted, because the divisions inside NATO after Anchorage reveal just how fragile Western unity really is. Europe watched Anchorage with mixed feelings. Poland and the Baltic states openly worried Trump might give away too much. Germany and France said talking was better than silence, but unity, it wasn't there. As Deutsche Welle noted, the Anchorage summit exposed cracks within NATO, and those cracks matter, because if Europe is divided, Putin will exploit it. So let's recap quickly before moving forward. Up to this point, Putin gained prestige, Trump gained optics, Ukraine lost a voice, and Europe revealed division. The picture is forming, but the consequences are still ahead. And now comes the question that should keep us all awake. Did the summit make the world safer, or did it quietly increase the risk of escalation? Anchorage did not reduce tensions. NATO jets remain on alert. Russian missile brigades are still in place. Close encounters continue at sea and in the air. Remember 1983? A NATO exercise nearly triggered a Soviet nuclear response because of a false alarm. Today, with hypersonic missiles and less trust, the margin for error is even smaller. So ask yourself, if there's no deal, no de-escalation, and no clear roadmap, are we actually closer to peace, or just closer to another accident? And here's the hidden cliffhanger. Anchorage may look calm, but the next misstep could be catastrophic. The real test of Anchorage is not what happened yesterday, it is what happens tomorrow. Because summits are judged not by the press conference, but by the chain reactions they unleash. On Monday, Trump meets Zelensky in Washington, and that meeting will reveal whether Ukraine still has agency in its own war, or whether it is being quietly sidelined. If Zelensky arrives demanding firm guarantees and military aid, and Trump responds with ambiguity, it will send a signal not only to Kyiv, but to Moscow and to every capital in Europe. Will Ukraine be treated as a partner with an equal voice, or as a junior player forced to accept decisions already shaped by Washington and Moscow? That is the first question. The second is how Russia will respond in the short term. Some analysts told Reuters they expect Moscow to pause, savoring the diplomatic win and waiting to see if Western unity weakens. Others believe Putin may escalate on the battlefield precisely to test how serious Trump is about turning words into actions. In Russian strategy, tests are constant, from cyber attacks to probing air defenses to sudden offensives designed to measure the opponent's resolve. Anchorage may therefore act not as a break, but as a trigger for more challenges. And then there is Europe, where leaders are already debating what Anchorage means for NATO. If Washington looks too flexible, Poland and the Baltic states may push harder for an independent security posture. If Washington doubles down, Germany and France may call for restraint. These divisions will play out in the months ahead, and Putin will be watching closely, waiting to exploit any cracks. And what about the United States itself? Congress is split. Some Republicans applaud Trump's willingness to engage, while Democrats warn that giving Putin legitimacy without extracting concessions is dangerous. The Pentagon has its own voice. Senior officials told the New York Times they remain cautious, keeping U.S. forces on alert across Europe and in the Arctic, because a photo op does not erase the reality of Russian missile brigades. All of this points to one simple truth. Anchorage is not an endpoint, it is a pivot point. The next 3 to 6 months will decide whether it leads to a fragile opening or to new escalation. So let me leave you with a direct question. When you look ahead, Do you see Anchorage as the first step toward peace, or as a rehearsal for bigger confrontations? Because history tells us, summits can either calm the storm or make the storm more dangerous by creating illusions of stability. And that's where we are left, waiting, watching, wondering, and bracing for what comes next. So here's the bottom line. Anchorage produced no ceasefire, no treaty, no breakthroughs. What it did produce were images: Putin on a red carpet, Trump at the microphone, and Ukraine left outside. For Moscow, that was enough to claim victory. For Trump, it was enough to look presidential. For Europe, it was enough to spark division. And for Ukraine, it was another painful reminder that its fate is being discussed by others. And that leaves us with one question: are we witnessing diplomacy, or are we witnessing theater? What do you think? Was Anchorage a step toward peace, or just a geopolitical show? Do you believe these talks actually bring us closer to ending the war, or do they only make it look normal while the fighting continues? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you've made it this far, you're not just scrolling. You're someone who wants to understand what's really at stake. So subscribe, share this with someone who needs context, and stay tuned, because the story of Anchorage isn't over, it's only the beginning.